Thank you very much. Thank you, Frans.
Good afternoon, and it's great to see all of you here. Yes, I'm a novice at the COP. That's true. Not so much actually on sustainability, because in the previous commission, the Juncker Commission, I held the responsibility for sustainability for 5 years. And thinking back, to be perfectly honest with you, when we started as Juncker Commission, sustainability was already a big issue, but not at the highest political level, because when creating that commission, it was simply overlooked. And when the European Parliament criticized Jean-Claude Juncker for this, I happened to be sitting next to him, and he looked at me, he said, well, Frans Timmermans will be responsible for sustainability. And it's one of the nicest things that happened to me, frankly. So I want to share with you a couple of lessons I learned very briefly, and why it is important to take a more holistic view of the issue. First of all, we are in the middle of arguably the biggest change the planet has ever seen, as long as humans are on it. And I always tell my kids, you know, I begin with this remark. We can't do without the planet, but the planet can very do without us. It did without us for a long, long time. Keep that in mind. And if we don't behave on the planet sooner or later is going to get rid of us because we do too much harm. And it's a very direct way of explaining to my kids what our responsibility is. And I say this because we have a tendency to compartmentalize the issues. We talk about emissions, and that we have a climate crisis which is linked to those emissions. And then we step out of that debate, and then we talk about biodiversity loss and the crisis that is creating. Then we step out of that debate and we look at the livability of our cities, and we see that in Europe more than 400,000 people die premature deaths because of bad air quality, etc., etc. Then we look at our economy and we say we have to protect jobs, so don't hurry up too much. But we are at a time when Mother Earth is telling us, I can't do this anymore in this way, where the population of the Earth is growing, so we need to find a solution for that, and where we're in the middle of an industrial revolution which is going to upturn the entirety of the world's economy. So how do we bring these things together? First of all, this change is going to happen whether we like it or not, whether we do something about it or not. It's going to happen. So we have a choice. Do we become masters of that change? Do we organize it in such a way so that we leave no one behind? Or do we just let it happen and then see what happens? And one thing I know, if we study previous industrial revolutions, unchecked, an industrial revolution will create a small group of incredible winners and a huge, huge group of incredible losers. That's in the nature of disruption caused by industrial revolution. So it needs to be managed and corrected, and that's why you have governance and politics, and that's why you have democracies. But now with the climate crisis coming in there, and the fact that Mother Earth can't sustain us if we continue to live like we live, we need to combine the two things. We need to make sure that this climate crisis doesn't lead to a few winners and a huge amount of losers, and that the industrial revolution doesn't do the same thing at the same time. So they need to reinforce each other in the right direction. That is actually at the core of the debate you are having here today. And that's why when we present the European Green Deal tomorrow, we want to try and show how a holistic approach of the issue is the only approach that is going to be effective. Looking at all the issues that we will have to tackle and all the measures we will have to take. Because in many of the debates, first of all, what is disappearing is the issue of climate deniers. I think that group is getting smaller and smaller, so that shouldn't take up too much of our energy anymore. I'm still willing to engage with them, but they're getting, you know, even Jeremy Clarkson has given that up, I think. So that's one thing. Secondly, and that's really worrying, there's an increasing group of people who, on the basis of science, because science is telling us almost on a weekly basis it's even worse than we thought, are saying, pardon my French, we're screwed anyway, never mind. That, to me, is the biggest threat to what we need to do. People think, screwed anyway, never mind, let's live it out as long as we can, and then we'll see. So we have to combat that. But we can only combat that if we can demonstrate, if we can show what we can do, and that we can show that people are a part of that and they can do something themselves as well. That should be the context of, I believe, presenting this. The third problem I have, and I get this almost every day, people say, yes, we know there's a climate crisis, we know we need to do something about this, but steady on, not too much, think about our industry, etc., etc. And they introduce a contradiction which is so false, and we have to be so careful about this. Because it is my view that if industry, if our economy does not embrace the necessity to go to that paradigm shift and to organize it, the only thing you do is slow down decline and possibly postpone the inevitable. But at what cost? Because that's the fourth element, final element. Always this argument. Okay, but we can't afford it. You yourself are saying this will need hundreds of billions of investment every year. True. But can we afford to do nothing? Should we not, and this is also a challenge to the scientific community, by the way, should we not tell people what the costs are of not doing anything? Apart from the moral costs, knowing that more than 400,000 people in Europe die premature deaths because of poor air quality, apart from the cost economically, the moral cost of not acting when you know this is incredible. And I'm not even going into erratic weather and floods and all of that. So the case should be made that it's in our interest and it's possible and it's economically viable to take this transition as an opportunity and do it. And this, already the circular economy is proving a viable option which creates new jobs. But just take cities, for instance. I was just at the Global Covenant of Mayors, where I said that cities are very interesting because they are the place where the problems are concentrated, but also where the creativity resides to find the solutions. So just imagine in cities. You look at our cities. Temperatures in many cities in Southern Europe are rising. Air quality is getting lower. Urban transportation getting more complicated. Construction is also getting more complicated. Look at nature-based solutions. We will propose tomorrow, I shan't go into the details, a massive program of reforestation in Europe, because I believe it is necessary. Sort of to do something in the different direction than what Europe has been doing for centuries. But as a part of that, I would like to see a greening of our cities. Greening the cities makes them more livable, improves the air quality, brings the temperature down, creates carbon sink, and all of that. That's a nature-based solution that people can relate to at a very personal, individual basis. This is something we can do ourselves immediately. And I think it speaks to sort of the very heart of our cortex. This is something we have a relationship with. It's part of our natural environment. Look at what we can do in the circular economy with waste management. What if we can get cities to come together to devise a plan to have emission-free public transport? It's not that difficult. It can be done. But if individual cities do this on an individual basis, they perhaps cannot gather the strength to negotiate the best possible deals with those who build the infrastructure and those who provide the electric buses, etc. But what if we get cities to scale that on a way that you don't order 100 or 200 buses, but 5,000, 6,000, 10,000. You get a completely different proposition, and you make a very interesting proposition to European car industry that is looking for new opportunities. My intention today is not to give you a blueprint. Our intention tomorrow is also not to give you a blueprint. It's an open invitation. Because if governance, public and private, has to change, and it does because of this new reality, it also has to be more open to people bringing other solutions and better ideas, open to a dialogue on whether this is the right choice to make, etc., etc. But at the same time, it has to be rigorous. We have to commit to be a climate-neutral continent by 2050. That is a rigorous commitment. And if you make that rigorous commitment, you have to think back. What does that mean for 2040? What does that mean for 2030? Which is, 10 years down the road. It's tomorrow. And this rigor, I believe, will offer the clarity to industry and investors and banks on where we will go. And that will hopefully unleash the level of investment that is needed to scale up the climate action also through economic means, also based on nature-based solutions. I strongly believe in this approach. But the rigor in saying, this is what the science says, this is what we need to do, that's where we need to be in 10 years' time, that's where we want to be in a generation's time, that rigor is not saying to the outside world, so this is the prescription, and we will just tell you exactly what to do step by step. No, but it is the framework within which the measures should be taken that we can take. I think corporate business is ready for this. I get clear signals that the banking sector and the financial sector is ready for this. I still think we have a lot of work to do to convince small and medium-sized enterprises that they have a huge part to play in this, because they, given also the economic challenges they've had over the last 10 years, they don't have the luxury to look ahead 10 or 20 years. They're thinking about tomorrow and next year, and we should be offering them some solutions. And I want to end on a second concrete point. I already mentioned the issue of reforestation and greening cities. Second concrete point. We need to build differently. It is possible to build with different materials that are sustainable. It is also possible to create building materials that are more sustainable. That's one side of things. But we have so many existing buildings, they also need to be brought up to a level of energy efficiency that helps us reduce emissions, especially in cities. To do that, houses will have to be isolated, solar panels will have to be installed, or heat pumps will have to be installed. For many people, this is an investment they'd like to make, but they can't make. They don't have that money ready. So we should be thinking with other partners and ways of empowering small and medium-sized enterprises to make an offer to residents or to corporations or to other owners of property, and saying, we will do this work. We'll isolate your house, make it energy sustainable. This might cost 15,000, 20,000 euros. We will not ask you to pay for that. We'll ask you to sign a contract, and from the day we have done this, you will pay the same amount of money you're now paying for energy, but then to us, and then after a certain amount of time, you will own what is done to your house. Your house will be more valuable, will be worth more than today, and your energy bill will go down. Because I hear this a lot. Yes, all very nice, but you're asking us to pay so much more for energy, we can't afford it. So this is another concrete proposal, and I'd love to end on that, where you can say that you can bring in the economy and small and medium-sized enterprises to do the right thing, create more jobs. These are jobs that can't go anywhere because they have to be done on the spot. Jobs for people, especially in the lower middle class and the middle class, who are most squeezed in this economy and in this economic transition. And this is a way we can have everybody engaged in a momentous movement, which I believe we cannot afford to miss. Thank you very much.